So I want to have a conversation. Rather than me going through some slides today, I actually want to make this more interactive because I think negotiations is really a foundation for our space. And it's not just for real estate. You actually negotiate every single day of your life. You negotiate with your kids. If you have children, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You negotiate with your spouse. How many of you have been at a standoff on where you're going to eat dinner at some point, right? At least 3 times a day, right? Every meal. And so negotiations is simply how do we influence people? How do we influence decisions or perspective? And so I want to go through some of the top strategies that I've found helpful and open the conversation for those of you who feel like you have maybe a strategy that's kind of your go-to in certain scenarios. I'd love to surface those as well. But I'm going to go through 6 different strategies that can help you be more effective with your negotiation skill sets in 2026. And I'm going to give you a bonus one that is, I think, the most important, that I think is often underutilized. So we'll break these down one by one. And to start with, I want to see if anybody can guess this word. How would you complete this statement? I know it might be a little small for Cameron and those in the back. No. To blank someone, you must know what already blanks them. Starts with an I. Influence. Okay. So rule number 1 is to effectively influence someone. You actually have to know what already influences them, which means I heard the other word. I think Devin said it. You have to know what their motivating factors are. Okay. So where would we start to actually uncover their motivations, their drivers, or what influences them? Questions, right? So you might have heard this saying that whoever asks questions has control, right? It's a statement, and Chris Voss talks about this in his Never Split the Difference is a good book on this. But effectively, when you ask questions, it actually gives you what I think is more important than control, is clarity, right? So it actually gives you some clarity around what's important to this individual. So when I'm talking about negotiation today, I actually want to just kind of say this as the foundation. In our industry, who do we have to negotiate with? List all of the different people that we negotiate with. Other agents, our clients, in-laws, especially if they come to the home inspection, right? Inspectors, contractors, appraisers. Appraisers is a big one. Ourselves, sometimes, right? So it's important to just realize, like, almost every interaction we have throughout the transaction is there's negotiation that's required. And the better that we deal with this skill set, the higher quality results we're going to get on the back end. So in order to influence somebody, we have to know what already influences them. Or we have to know their motivations. And we do this through effective questions. We'll kind of circle back to these. We're going to have a conversation on them, but I want to go through each at a time. Number 2 is that we want to anchor with something specific. Okay. What was it? Facts is an important one. And there's another word that I'm looking for that starts with a D. Becca, would you just mouth? Yes. This is something that's very hard for people to disagree with, which is facts or data, right? So let's just take into this scenario. You go into a listing appointment. How do you typically prepare for a listing appointment? Like, what are some of the data points you want to bring? Comps, days on market, list to sales ratio, Why that number? Mm. Why would days on market be such an important metric for you to be able to show with them and show them with actual statistics, data-backed information? Why? Jordana? Yes. So if average days on market is like 65 and their home hasn't sold in the first 7 days like it was in 2021, in their mind, you already know they're probably questioning like why, right? If we haven't properly framed the average days on market, right? Why else would that number be important? It ties very closely with another number, price, right? It's actually the anchor for a pricing strategy. And so when we can anchor them to the data of, for example, days on market and getting clear about, here's the thing, influence. So going back to number 2 or number 1, we actually have to get clarity around their motivations and their timeline, right? If you have an investor that has a vacant home that they're selling, are their motivations going to be different than a family that's living in the home and they're looking for a home to upgrade into on timeline? Potentially, right? So that's why we have to ask questions up here, get clarity, because then this helps us with any kind of data that we're going to anchor to their decisions. Does that make sense? Okay, so clarity comes first. Then we've got to anchor with data, not, this is an important one, not emotion. Would you say that buyers and sellers typically are making emotional decisions throughout this process? Like 98% of the time, right? The only way to actually combat that is through data. Okay. Have you ever heard the saying that a person, help me finish this because I may not say it the right way, but something to the extent of somebody convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. Have you heard that? Right. So opinion is when there's no data to back it up. Data is facts. It's not opinion. Does that make sense? So if we're using emotion, that's where it's just an opinion essentially. So if you try and convince them into a certain listings pricing strategy or anything of that extent without backed up data, they're really just making an emotional decision that's not going to stick. So we have to get clear on the data. Number 3 is we have to separate, not personal, close. I'm going to put this last one in here. This last word is problem. People. So we have to separate people from the problem. So oftentimes, especially I see this when I have maybe a new agent that will call on a listing of mine and they're trying to negotiate, right, in situations. It is not us, and maybe they're trying to do a low offer or whatever the case may be. It is never us versus each other. You want to make it us versus the problem. Okay. So I want to flesh out some examples of where this comes out. And if you have this happen in different scenarios that come to mind, please throw those out. But where are some scenarios where an agent can kind of feel like it's me versus you? We're negotiating and I'm going to fight to the death to get what we want. Where does that usually happen? Price is a big one. Where else? Sometimes in compensation that can show up as well. Repairs very heavily, this pops up, right? And so let's actually use repairs as an example, which I'm going to kind of pair these two together. So that's actually number 5. Where do some of the conflicts arise on repairs? Bidding them out. So Are you speaking from the listing agent's perspective or the buyer's agent perspective? Okay. So on the listing agent side, right, an agent might ask for a number. And our first reaction before we go to our seller is what's backing this number, right? If they're asking for 5,000 in repairs or 7,000 in repairs, like why that number? So an agent who is effective is going to answer that question before they ask it, right? If you're on the buyer's agent side, switching roles here, you're going to pre-frame and say, here's the bids that we got for these items that we know are important to my client. Here's the exact cost. So we're actually giving data, right, to that listing agent. And there's a conflict though when there's no data to back it, right? So kind of all these do mesh together, but in this scenario, if you have repairs where there's no data to back it, that's usually where a conflict arises. How else does it show up during repairs?
I think it's like necessary. Or maybe it is.
Yes. So what is the need or the necessity of those items in question? Right? Yes. Always goes back to motivations for both sides, right? And this is just where if you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent, you have to be asking the question, what's my buyer's or seller's motivations? And what is the other side's motivations? Because we've got to find the alignment on both of those to make the deal work, right? So here's a little strategy that I'll give you on repairs. I'm going to speak from the buyer's agent side. One of the things that I do, and I learned this from a friend who's in San Francisco, is you want to, what do people value? If you think about this question, they value life above everything else. So what you want to do psychologically is get them to accept these two things. Okay. So L and H, which stands for life and health safety. So whenever I send a request to the other side, I say the most important thing for us in this process is to make sure that we are only identifying items that came back to life or health safety for my clients. So here's the specific list of those items, and here's the associated price that we found in our research that it's going to cost to repair those items. Because what I don't want them to do is try to negotiate on the necessity of these items, right? This is literally like if, I don't know, and this is even like, have you ever had somebody ask to repair the smoke alarms, right? Now, as an agent, when you get that, your initial thought is what? It's like $50, right? It's like very cost effective, very low cost repair. But if I anchor it with these are life and health safety items, now I personally try not to ask for that unless my clients are really pushing for it, right? But I'm always anchoring it back to life and health safety items. Does that make sense? So you're anchoring them to something very hard to negotiate with, okay? Which I'm going to actually just go through this ninja strategy because this is the most important. Excuse me. So here's the thing that, how many of you have played chess before? How is chess different? Like, how is it a little bit different than checkers? It's more complex.
Think ahead.
I think there's more rules that are involved in the game that we have to be aware of. We have to pay attention to. Yeah. And so the strategy is a little bit different. And one of the greatest things that you can do with any negotiation in life is something called pre-frame. Does anybody know what this means? Can you give me a simple explanation of pre-framing? Spencer.
No choice. It's like all about framing, right? Of course, we all want choice. Of course, we all want life, right? But it's like this whole idea of just like we're gonna frame it in the way of choice and life versus like I don't want life versus I do want. Of course, one is going to win. So the way that you frame the conversation, it's
Yeah.
Is this like I mean the best example I can think of is like Eminem, you know, in his rap battle, he brings up all the things wrong about him first. He basically brings up all the objections right away so that when it comes time for objections, like they can't give him anymore
Yeah.
because you already talked about it, you already framed it.
8 Mile, is that
8
what you're
Mile?
bringing up?
Yeah.
If you might have seen that. That's exactly it. So in that scene, what Eminem does is he actually disses himself and he makes jokes about himself, all the things that he thinks his opponent's going to say about him. So when his opponent comes up to the mic to rap battle against him, what can he now say? He's either going to repeat what Eminem just said, or he basically just like, I can't do it, right? I'm going to give up. So pre-framing is this. It's essentially that, let's just say I'm not an artist, so forgive me. So let's just say that this is a chess board. These are the checkers on the board. And you have certain pieces on here. And this one is your queen. Okay. And this is, let's say, somebody's king here. Pre-framing is anticipating somebody else's move, what they're going to do, and you then positioning your chess piece, setting it up before they make their move, because it now is going to influence their next strategy. Right. So instead of being reactive and saying, okay, I'm going to wait for them to move and then I'm going to just figure out what I want to do next. For example, with buyers, I know they're already going to look at this home inspection report and ask for 37 items to be repaired. Right. So if I know that, what I should do is pre-frame the strategy to them. I should have a conversation beforehand. I do this in 2 ways. I send an email that goes through this and I say, hey, our inspection's coming up tomorrow, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to look for anything that is a life safety or health safety issue. So I use that same framing with my buyers. And I say any of those items is what we're going to ask for the seller to either repair or for a credit. There's going to be a lot of cosmetic things that you're going to find in the home, and that's normal. So I'm going to normalize this. So I'm framing everything in that conversation, right? This is all in an email. I say there's going to be cosmetic and normal wear and tear on every home, even if it's brand new. Okay. We're not going to ask for those items, or it's not typical to ask for those items. That's actually the way that I do it. And so I'm essentially putting that email together. I send it to them. So what do you think their mindset is when they walk into the home for that home inspection? What are they already thinking? Yeah. Like they're not going to be nitpicky because like, no, this is Shoni already pre-framed it that we're not going to ask for those small items that just don't have significant value. Right. And part of that email, one little line is essentially if it is a major cost too. So for example, like there's settling in the home, that still ties in my mind back to like a life safety, issue. But most stuff for them, like if it's a water heater, that's toast. Yeah. Like we're going to ask for that to be repaired. But this just gets them away from the nitpicky stuff because I pre-frame that conversation. Any questions around that? Where else might we use pre-framing? Showing homes. In what ways? Mm.
The listing agent might not have staged the home to look like a model home. So trying to help them see beyond what the decorations are.
Yeah. So helping them see what the home could be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See the vision for the home.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great one. Spencer. Pricing. So
or even list about 2 weeks. There's this many showings, there's no showings, increase it by this much. Of course, we talk about pricing saying, hey, your price is not dependent on what you want, what you pay for it, what the neighbor says, what another agent says, what I say. It's going to depend on what the market says. And then that way you can use, information, data instead of emotion to them.
Yeah, let me just give you a little framework for this. So like, let's say we're sitting down with the seller. Okay. What do all sellers want? They want to win, right? What does that look like?
A good deal.
Getting the max amount for their home in the shortest period of time with the least amount of hassle, right? And so if we know that's their motivation, okay, what we want to do though is also know that most of them are not data informed. So they have a price typically in mind that came from where?
Zillow.
Social media. Who? Zillow. Right? Which, does anybody remember that stat of how often Zillow's accurate on pricing? Or the percentage off, excuse me, that it typically is. I think it's like somewhere like 15 to 17% price like swings, right, that are off. So it's like, it's not a trusted data source, but the consumer thinks it is, right? So how might we pre-frame that conversation in the listing appointment? Well, one of them Spencer kind of mentioned is you want to say things to them that helps them to kind of understand the direction that you're heading in. So for example, if I were to say, hey, one of the common ways that people try to price their home is based off what their neighbors sold their home for 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, or 8 months ago, right? And the challenge with that is the market shifts, the market changes. For example, I want to kind of go through some of the data points that are important for this market. One being how many listings there are on the market today than there compared to 12 months ago, right? Because what happens when we show them that inventory went from roughly 4,000 homes on the market to 14,000 homes on the market, right? Now buyers have plenty of options. Does that change the price for their home? Yeah, because there's a lot more supply, far less demand, right? But we can only paint that picture if we show them the data, right? But I'm pre-framing it by saying, hey, most people price their home based off of what, a specific number they have in mind, or maybe how much their neighbor sold their home for 6 months ago. And what I found is the sellers that actually sell their home for the most amount of money, so I'm bringing in their motivation, what they do is they price it based off data. They price it based off of current comps, right? Which is our competition. It's stuff that's active on the market. And looking at how long homes in this area are sitting on the market. So days on market, right? So what I want to go through with you guys today is just some of the data that's backing this. But did you have an initial price in mind, right? So we can ask that question just to get clear around where they're roughly anchored. Because here's let's say that you have already done comps and you've come up with a price of $570 for that home. You're not going to lead with that, but you ask them the question of what they want to price their home for, roughly. And they say 605. What does that do for you as you're going through comps? That piece of information. Gives you some ammo, some clarity. And first you want to ask the question, right, of understanding what's important to them about moving. Great, got the number, that's fine. The number really doesn't matter. I just want to know. But what's important to you guys about making this move? So I want to know what their motivations are, right? But once I get into the actual comps, so I'm showing them the data of here's 7 different homes that we found. Here's 3 that are active right now. Here's how many days they've been on the market. Here's the 4 that have sold already. They all closed in the last 90 days in this area. And I want to go through these photos. Now, I personally use Cloud CMA to do this. So I do mine all digitally, unless it's an older person probably 65 plus, then I probably I would do both the digital and I'd have it printed out as well. But for most people, I'm using an actual digital presentation and either doing it AirPlay to their TV, or maybe I'm doing a Zoom meeting and just screen sharing it. And what I'll do is I'll go through and slide through the photos of showing them the different comps that are really anchoring back to the actual value. And just saying, like, if you guys would look at this home compared to yours, how would you rate this home compared to yours, or your home compared to this home, right? If you go through 6 different comps or 7 different comps that are all around this price, some of them are probably going to be a little bit lower, some maybe a little bit higher. And you say, look, all of these homes that are active on the market right now have been on the market for 30 to 65 days. Here is 3 different pricing recommendations I have for you. You guys tell me what's important to you in this process. And I personally am going to recommend 3 different prices. One is the aggressive. One is the market reality. And then one is the speed, basically. So if speed's important to them. So this is where this principle comes into play. I'll flip between these really quick. So you have to offer options, not ultimatums. Now, this applies in all negotiation strategies, but especially with sellers, because oftentimes agents will come in with one price. They'll say, my recommendation is to price your home at this. Have you guys ran into that before? Or have you potentially done it before, right? The challenge with that is you're not giving them flexibility. You're not giving them an option. So what you might do to just change the frame is say, I'm going to recommend, based off all the comps that I've shown you, I'm going to recommend 3 different pricing strategies depending on what your goals are. So number 1 is aggressive. And that aggressive range for me is going to be, and that's where I'm making it up on the spot based off of what's there, but also what their pricing range is, right? Or what they're trying to hope for. So I say the aggressive pricing for me, I would recommend somewhere between 575 up to 590 at the high end. And with this, you're probably going to see an average days on market similar to this home that's priced at 585 and it's been on the home for 67 days, right? So I'm going to anchor them to an actual data point. Does that make sense? So option 1 is that we list aggressively, and I'm trying to get as close as I can without being like, I'm not going to go to 605 because there's just nothing that foundationally supports that number. But I'm going to try and get them close, right? And anchoring this to their home's going to sit. The second pricing strategy, the market reality, is more around like, hey, all of the comps are generally around this 570. So I'm going to say, if you want to be competitive, again, things like this language matters. So if you guys want to be competitive, now, do they want to be competitive? Most likely, right? So they're answering that question in their mind saying, yes, we want to be competitive. So hopefully they're at least saying, yeah, this is a better option than option 1. Or I say, now, if speed is important to you, we need to be strategic. So then this last one is strategic. So if you want to be competitive here, if you want to be strategic, we need to price to hopefully stimulate multiple offers. So I think we can get you guys a great price on this home. And that's going to be probably 550 to, and I'm throwing some random numbers out here, but 550 to 560, let's say. So I'm going to anchor them lower and say, if we list in this 550 to 560, it's not guaranteed, but it's far more likely for us to get a multiple offer situation. It is easier for people to get emotionally invested in your home once they've walked through it, rather than them just seeing photos. This price is going to get people in the door. And when you have 2 people who come in and get emotionally invested, they fall in love with your property, that sparks a bidding war, right? And that's where we can get this price anchored higher. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the conversation framework that I'm having with them. So I say, based on the data that we've gone through and these options, which one do you feel like is best for you? Does that make sense? What do you guys notice about that process? What does that do differently than just providing them one number? Freedom, right? They've got options. They're in control. But I've also framed it. I've framed it around like this. I know their home's going to sit. And so I'm strategically telling them, like, you can price it there, but it's going to sit. But I'm also getting this number away from their mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're also gonna lose, you're also gonna like not have to worry later on about them being mad at you. For selling at the right price or whatever, because it was their idea. It could
Yeah.
be their idea,
100%.
then they own it,
Yes.
which helps a lot later down the road.
Yep. Which is on the backside here. I think I wrote that one down. Nope. That one wasn't one. That was one that I thought of, though, is that if somebody, you want to have people, if it's their idea, they're going to be far more emotionally bought into the idea than if it's your idea, right? So again, that's where if you're giving them options, they're the ones making that choice. And another thing that Spencer brought up earlier, which is that you can also pre-frame the price reduction conversation, right? So pre-frame is saying, hey, now what we found is if we've had 10 showings, but no offers in the first 2 weeks, what does that mean we need to do?
Sure.
Reprice. People are coming in the home, but they're not interested in putting an offer. Why might that be? It's either the condition of the home, or they feel like the price is not worth the condition of the home, right? Or worth the value. If we've had X amount of showings, or let's say we had 0 showings or 2 or 3, right? By this timeline, then we need a price reduction. So you're pre-framing all of those scenarios up front, so it's easier for them to make that conversation or that decision down the road, right? So, but I do think this is the most important right now is we're in a market where things are sitting for longer. The number one skill set and strategy you can focus on is negotiating with the sellers on pricing it right. So first comes the data, do the homework, and then you have to have the right conversation to make them make the right decision, ultimately. Robin?
Well, right? And so you have flexibility to appeal to different personalities with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And learn their bottom line. And you may have a difference between a husband and a wife too, but at least you're giving those options and not just pigeonholing them.
Totally.
You learn a lot about someone who and what they choose, which,
Yeah,
which route they go to
absolutely.
help you throughout the whole rest of the negotiating.
Yeah. How many of you have been in the 6 human needs training that we've done? Right. So we don't have time for this right now to go into all of it, but what's the baseline need that everybody needs? Certainty, security, right? So certainty and security is at the bottom of this foundation where most people, not all, some people are willing to take risk. They're fine with uncertainty. But a lot of your sellers, they want certainty. That's where this number, the words you use around this number is important, right? And this number. So if you say most people go with the route that's going to cause multiple offers, or this is the safest route for getting your home sold fast. This is the safest route, meets their need of certainty. Does that make sense? So if you just go to the bare necessities of saying, well, I don't know what their influence, their motivations are, just know that their grounding motivation most likely is certainty in the scenario. What's the most likely outcome, and how can you anchor it to these 2 pricing structures? Does that make sense? Anything else on this? It's important to you guys.
For me, I care a lot about this because maybe I'm more emotional than most men out there, but I feel it all the time in negotiations with other agents, and I love that Keller Williams has this win-win idea, because I found that 100% of the time that there's not a win-win, it's a lose. on both sides. It's either a win-win or it's a lose-lose. I've never seen a win-lose before. And so part of that is, I think this is so essential to understand the motivations on both sides. I think the best agents I've worked with on the other side have been those who have understood the motivations of their clients and who have worked together as a team with me. Like we're not enemies as agents. We're a team working together to get the best transaction for both of our clients. And to do that, we have to understand the motivations of our clients and be open with each other, with the other agent, of what those motivations are, so that we can meet in the middle. It's so frustrating when either the other agent does not know the motivations of their clients, or they're not willing to share any of those motivations, and you're just shooting in the dark. And then you end up say I'm on the buyer side, and the seller won't tell me any of the seller's motivations. I'm shooting in the dark, and I end up giving the offer that the seller doesn't even want. Maybe they're more motivated by time, and they need to get out quick. They don't care about the money as much. They didn't tell me that, and I offered them a higher amount of money, but they're like, "Oh, we don't care. We're going to go with this other offer." So if both parties can know the motivations of their clients, man, it's just magic when two agents work together and to create something a win-win for both.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know, did you read my board before we went through this? Is that what you did? So number 6, this last piece, and we'll wrap up, is just always remember in negotiations, it's all about the relationship is greater than the deal. So that's always going back to this win-win or no deal. Like there are agents who will negotiate at all costs. So they'll say, I will get this, I will create a scenario where my clients will win. This is the energy of it. We will win. I hope you guys can find a win. Right? That's the common theme, unfortunately, in negotiations. The highest and best is saying, I will always find a win for both sides. Even though I'm not supporting their client, I'm not supporting that agent. But the reality is we're probably going to do deals together in the future. So if I make a win-win now, it's likely that we'll be able to do deals together again in the future. And there's some agents who I've done deals with where I'm like, I will never do business again with that person, right? Because of how they showed up in the transaction. So just always know there's a way to find a win-win, or saying, hey, it's just not meant to be. There's no deal here that we can structure because of how things are playing out. So, but always value the relationship over the deal. And with that, there's the idea of Win Friends and Influence People, the book by Brian Tracy. And just realize that people want to do business with people that they like and they trust. So if you want to do business with the other agent, create an environment where they like you, they trust you. You want to do business with a seller, with a buyer, doesn't matter who it is, build an environment where they like you and they trust you. Those are the 2 most simple negotiation strategies that you can deploy, is building this environment where people trust you. Okay. So use some of those strategies in 2026. You'll see it move the needle in your business. Thank you, Keystone, for bringing lunch for us today. We appreciate you guys. Have a great week.